In this video, Stephanie Link analyzes the recent market sell-offs impacting tech stocks, particularly in the chip and energy sector. She questions the competitive advantage of China's Deepseek tech over U.S. firms, while affirming that the market can sustain multiple AI companies due to the long-term growth opportunities in data centers and electrification. Stephanie also highlights concerns about the commoditization of AI through open source models and their effect on traditional business models, as well as skepticism about large firms adopting such technologies due to security risk.
Able to take share? Will the U.S. tighten export controls further on Chinese companies in general? And which companies are going to use Deepseek to launch their massive AI initiatives? I'm not saying that they can't take some share, but I think the pie is big enough for all of these companies to not only survive, but to thrive. That being said, though in the past 2 years, the S&P 500 is up 20% plus, mainly because of the Mag 7. And so I wouldn't be surprised to just see a little bit more volatility in the names. I think you want to look for opportunity. Amazon would be the one I would look for. I wouldn't be running out today, but it's more than an AI story. You know, it's an e-commerce story, operating profit story. Operating income is going to grow in 2024. Last year, 85%. And it's going to grow another probably 60% this year. So that would be the one I would look there. On the AI semis, I don't own NVIDIA, sadly, because it's had such a nice run. It's still up 133% in the past year. I own Broadcom. Broadcom is a little bit more diversified. They do have an AI bent to them for sure, but they also have a software component with VMware. And they also have their non-AI businesses, the cyclical businesses that are troughing. So that would also be one that on a pullback I would look at. And then one last thing I would say, really important, if you believe in AI in general, which I think we all do, you do need data centers. And we only have 11,800 data centers in the world. We have 5,400 data centers here in the U.S., and that number is probably going up to at least 10,000 over the next several years. And we are going to spend money on the grid because we haven't spent money on the grid in 50 years. $4 trillion between now and 2050 on electrification spend. 70% of our electric transmission lines are over 25 years old. So I get today, I get the reactions, let it settle, and you pick your spots.
Stephanie, here's though the question. I think there's a couple, I just want to, embedded here are 3 different issues. One is, if you actually think that open source, putting aside just the Deepseek of it all, if you actually think that open source wins over closed, that raises profound questions just off the bat, because it means that the actual technology itself becomes a commodity. It's something that Satya Nadella was effectively tweeting about last night. He did say this could become commoditized. The good news he was arguing is that it will still create an enormous amount of demand. Okay? Even if you don't think Deepseek is better than OpenAI or one of the other closed models today, you could argue it's at least as good, which if you're a business today, and I was talking to Becky earlier on the broadcast, I talked to so many CEOs in Davos who were talking about how they're using some of these closed source advanced frontier models like an OpenAI, like the stuff from Anthropic, playing around with it, and then going and trying to replicate as much as they can using Llama, which is created by Meta. But by the way, Meta's not making money doing this because that's an open source model. And so long term, if it becomes an open source business, there's some economic issues there. But the second piece, which is even bigger, I think, is the idea that Deepseek works on this laptop right here. The processing isn't in the cloud the way you're talking about. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. And that is a fundamental change. The amount of processing power required to actually operate these things may not require necessarily, you will still need, I'm not saying you're not going to need any data centers at all, but the sense that you're going to necessarily need massive data centers the way we've been talking about could actually get upended, no?
Well, I mean, so maybe you don't go to 10,000 data centers here in the United States, although I still believe that to be the case by 2030. So let's cut that number in half. You still need them, number one. Number two, we don't even know about the security aspect for Deepseek, right? And open source models in general. So that's a big thing. And I just don't think you're going to see big Fortune 500 companies going to use Deepseek because of what I just mentioned, the security piece of it all. So let's come back to the other piece, is the hyperscalers are going to spend $270 billion this year, up 41% on AI. Okay, let's scale that back as well. But it's not going to go to zero. And I will totally believe what the CEO of Microsoft said in terms of, okay, if it becomes a commodity, then we don't spend as much, okay, but the demand will still be there. The demand may well offset the price decline. So, I mean, I still think there's just so many questions.
Right. Stephanie, here's the thing.
You don't have to jump it today.
Right. I agree on a lot of what you're saying. I just want to say on the security piece, what's so interesting about it is, unlike a TikTok, which is a closed model, obviously with its own algo controlled by a company that's based in China, when you're an open-sourced product, you can actually see the entire science of it, and you can run it locally, as I said, on your laptop, literally. And so when people say, well, there's going to be security concerns, they almost are ameliorated very quickly insofar as, because it's open source, you can see everything that's going on. It doesn't have to be operated in the cloud sitting in Beijing somewhere. So, and even if you decide that the world isn't going to use Deepseek for whatever reason, to not believe that others are not going to be able to replicate Deepseek now that we understand it and it's open source within months from now, I think is a big miss. I think we are at a moment where clearly, whether it's Deepseek or somebody creating a new version of Deepseek in an open source model, I think it raises profound questions about the whole situation.
Well, I mean, you make very good points, Andrew, and it's hard to argue in terms of the replication of it, the speed of which, I mean, the fact that Deepseek took them such a short period of time to build it is really pretty remarkable. So I definitely give you that, and the competition and those that, again, will replicate it. I think it will take time. In the meantime, I don't think the hyperscalers are just going to sit back and let this happen and not figure out their own competitive sources as well. So I just think that there are a lot of moving parts at this point in time. I don't necessarily think this is all of a sudden going to go from a $350 billion total addressable market today to zero. I don't believe that at all. But that's not to say, from a stock point of view, from an investment point of view, that you run in and jump in today and buy these stocks. I think you pick your spots and you pick where you can have a diversified revenue stream, not necessarily a pure play in terms of AI.